The alien market was alive with noise and light, a place where every corner smelled of strange spices and unknown metals. Traders from 100 worlds shouted their prices, holding up cages, weapons, and exotic creatures. Ethan Cross walked through the narrow paths between stalls, his boots clinking on the rusty floor plates. He had come here for one reason too: buy spare parts for his ship before the next storm season in the asteroid belt. But the parts were expensive, too expensive. And Ethan knew he would need to bargain hard. He moved from stall to stall, ignoring the calls of greedy merchants trying to sell him useless junk. He was used to this chaos. He thought nothing here could surprise him anymore. Then he heard it, a voice, soft but desperate, cutting through the shouts of the market. Please. Human? It wasn't a trader's call. It wasn't the bark of a seller. It was trembling, pleading, almost breaking. Ethan stopped. He turned his head slowly, scanning the crowd, and then he saw her. A small alien girl, no older than 8, stood in the shadow of a metal cage. Her skin was pale with a faint shimmer. Her hair thin and tangled. Her clothes were torn, far too big for her small frame. Inside the cage sat a woman, clearly the girl's mother. She was chained at the wrists, and wolves, chicks. And wolves my works, and wolves my works rise. Only Ruby Kiss has the luxurious texture that glides on sweeve. Walls my walls, walls walls, K's. Walls walls, walls walls, walls walls. Wah walls, Tay side a wall. Walls walls walls. Dot side, K walls. Y wall, by Y's wall. Dot K, Y walls, by as, but. It was Led's call or Sigreka denied. Kami says it. Kiss it's as he said. I secret you said silla you says it to sit to kada sat sit to sit it can you sit it to killa duck cup up he said get this is kick read together put the dance sit to live ankles. Her back bent as if she could barely hold herself up. The woman's eyes were half closed, her breathing slow, her body covered in faint bruises. The little girl's large golden eyes locked on Ethan's. She stepped forward, as far as the invisible line of danger allowed her. Her voice shook again. Please, human. Be my dad and my mom's husband. The words hit Ethan like a shock. For a moment, he thought he had misheard. The crowd didn't notice, but the merchant standing nearby laughed, a cold metallic laugh. She's begging again. The alien trader sneered. Pathetic, isn't it? The kid thinks someone will take them home, but no one wants broken goods. Ethan's brow furrowed. He didn't like the way the merchant said goods, as if they were not even people. The girl didn't look away from him. She clutched the bars of the cage, and he saw how thin her fingers were, how fragile. The merchant saw Ethan staring and smirked. You want them? The mother's half dead, the kid's a waste of food. Their only trouble, human. Ethan didn't answer. He felt a weight in his chest. A memory trying to push its way back, his own childhood, the night he had lost his family. The cold streets where no one had reached out a hand to help. He looked again at the girl, at the silent plea in her eyes. What's their price? Ethan asked, his voice calm but firm. The merchant laughed again. Price? For this junk? Could have them for a handful of credits. But since you're asking, maybe I double it. You look like the type who can't leave a sad face alone. The girl's small hand reached out between the bars, trembling. Please. Don't let them take my mom away again. They'll hurt her. Ethan felt his jaw tighten around them. The market noise continued, alien voices bargaining, the hiss of steam from cooking stalls, the clank of weapons changing hands. But for Ethan, everything had gone silent except for the girl's voice. He stepped closer. The merchant raised an eyebrow. Careful, human. Once you buy trouble, it sticks to you forever. Ethan's hand went to the pouch at his belt. Inside was everything he had left after weeks of work credits. A few pieces of trade goods, and the last power cell for his ship. If he spent it all here, his journey home would be dangerous. Maybe impossible. He took a slow breath. The girl's golden eyes didn't blink. The mother in the cage opened her eyes fully now, watching him with a mixture of hope and fear. In that moment, Ethan knew, if he walked away, they would be gone before nightfall. Sold to someone who would break them even more. He didn't walk away. I'll take them, Ethan said quietly. The merchant grinned. Then pay, human. Ethan emptied his pouch on the stall's counter, credits clinking. Trade goods stacked, the power cell placed on top.
Yes.
The merchant's eyes widened at the sight. Greed replaced mockery. Deal, he said quickly, releasing the lock on the cage. The little girl ran to Ethan, clutching his coat. Her voice was so soft only he could hear. Thank you, Dad. Ethan looked down at her, unsure what to say. His heart felt heavier, not lighter, because he knew this was just the beginning. Somewhere in the shadows of the market, eyes were watching, and they would not let this new family leave so easily. Ethan stood still for a moment, his hand resting gently on the little girl's shoulder. The alien market was still loud around him, but now every sound felt distant. The girl clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a storm. Her mother, still weak, tried to stand, the chains rattling as she struggled to move. The merchant leaned back in his seat, a smug smile spreading across his face. His thick fingers tapped on the metal counter. You paid for them, human. But I think I gave you too good a deal. Maybe I should raise the price. After all, you seem very interested. Ethan's eyes narrowed. We had a deal. The merchant chuckled, showing teeth that looked more like broken shards of glass. In this market, deals change the moment you walked up. Every other trader saw how you looked at them. That means you care, and when you care, you'll pay more. The little girl's grip tightened on Ethan's coat. Her voice trembled. Please, don't leave us. Ethan didn't answer her. He stepped closer to the merchant's counter, his voice low. You want more credits? I don't have more. You'll take what I gave you, or you'll have nothing. The merchant's smile faded for a moment, but then he laughed again. You're brave. Human, I like that. But this is my stall, and my rules. If I wanted, I could sell them to someone else before you walk out that gate. Around them, a few alien traders began to take notice. Whispers passed through the crowd. Some laughed, some watched with curiosity, and a few with hunger in their eyes, hunger for trouble. Ethan could feel the situation getting worse. The merchant was trying to provoke him, to make him desperate enough to pay even more. But then, Ethan noticed something, a small detail. Almost hidden on the chain around the mother's wrist was a faint mark. A crest burned into the metal. It wasn't the mark of the merchant. It belonged to a different owner. Someone powerful. Ethan leaned forward, his voice just loud enough for the merchant to hear. These two aren't yours, are they? The merchant froze for half a second before covering it with a smirk. What does it matter? They're here, and I'm selling them. That's all you need to know. Ethan's suspicion grew. He had been in enough shady markets to know when someone was bluffing. If the merchant didn't own them, then he couldn't legally sell them. Here, that meant the whole transaction was already dangerous for the merchant. Not for Ethan. He decided to gamble. If you want to keep this quiet, you'll take what I paid and hand over the keys now. Or maybe I start asking questions, loud enough for the whole market to hear. The merchant's smirk faded completely. His eyes narrowed. You think you're smart, human. But smart people often disappear here. The little girl spoke again, her voice small but clear. Please, don't let him take my mom away again. Her words cut through the tension. Ethan kept his gaze locked on the merchant, the aliens. Thick fingers drummed on the counter for a few seconds before he finally reached under it and pulled out a set of keys. With a growl, he tossed them onto the metal surface. "Take them and go, human, before I change my mind." Ethan picked up the keys and quickly moved to the cage. The lock clicked open and the door creaked as it swung outward. The girl helped her mother stand, but the woman's legs shook so badly she nearly fell. Ethan stepped in and supported her, feeling how light she was, as if she hadn't eaten in days. The merchant muttered something in his own language, and the nearby traders laughed. Ethan ignored them. He focused only on getting the two of them away from here. As they moved toward the market exit, Ethan could feel the weight of eyes on his back. This wasn't over. Someone was watching them closely. Someone who didn't like the fact that he had just taken the mother and child away. Halfway to the gate, the little girl spoke again. "My name is Lyra," she said softly. "This is my mom, Sira." Ethan gave a small nod. "I'm Ethan," he replied, "and you're both coming with me now." They walked faster, weaving through the crowd. Every step felt longer, heavier. Ethan kept glancing over his shoulder, and each time, he spotted the same figure, a tall alien in a dark hood. Keeping pace several stalls behind them when they finally reached the open gate of the market. The tall figure disappeared into the shadows, but Ethan knew he hadn't imagined it. Whoever that was, they would see them again. Outside the market, the noise faded slightly, replaced by the hum of ships docking and leaving the station. Ethan guided Sira and Lyra toward his small freighter. It wasn't much, but it was safe. Or, at least, it had been safe until now. As they stepped inside, Ethan closed the hatch and locked it. He looked at the two of them and said, "Rest here. I'll get us out of this station." Lyra sat beside her mother, holding her hand. Sira's tired eyes met Ethan's for the first time without flinching. She didn't speak, but there was something in her gaze, something between fear and gratitude. Ethan turned toward the cockpit, his mind already racing. He knew that leaving this station quietly would be impossible now. Too many had seen him. Too many would talk. And someone, maybe that hooded figure, would be coming for them soon. The bargain had been made, but the price of taking them was only just beginning to show itself. The hum of the station's docking bay echoed faintly through the hull of Ethan's ship. He sat in the pilot's seat, eyes scanning the controls outside. Ships came and went like shadows. The market's noise was gone now. But Ethan knew the danger had followed them. In the small living space behind him, Lyra sat on the floor beside her mother. Sira leaned weakly against the wall, her breathing shallow. The chains had been removed, but the marks around her wrists and ankles told the story of months, maybe years, of captivity. Ethan keyed in the flight sequence. The engines began to warm. A deep vibration rolling through the floor. He opened the COM channel to request departure clearance. But the screen flickered before a voice answered, "Freighter Nomad, your departure is delayed." The station officer said coldly, "Remain docked until further notice." Ethan's jaw tightened. He knew what this meant. Someone had already contacted the station authorities. Someone didn't want them leaving. He switched the COM off and turned in his seat. "You two need to be ready. If we leave, it might be rough." Lyra looked at him, her golden eyes wide. "Are they coming?" "After us." Ethan didn't lie. Yes, the ship's proximity sensors beeped softly. Someone was approaching. Ethan checked the small camera feed and saw two figures moving down the docking bay walkway. One of them was the tall hooded figure he had seen in the market. The other carried what looked like a stun rifle. Ethan moved quickly, locking the interior doors and grabbing his sidearm. He didn't like fights, but he liked being hunted even less. From behind, he heard Sira's voice for the first time, low and soft. "They won't stop until they have us again." Ethan glanced back. "Who are they?" Sira hesitated, then said, "Collectors." They take those who owe debts, real or imagined, and sell them to the highest bidder. We escaped them once. But they found us again, before Ethan could respond. The sound of fists hitting metal rang. Through the ship, someone was at the outer hatch, pounding hard. Ethan moved to the console. Bypassing the station's docking lock, the engines roared louder. The pounding on the hatch grew faster. Lyra clutched her mother's arm, fear in her voice. "Dad, hurry." The word Dad caught him off guard, but he didn't let it slow him. "Hold on to something," he said, flipping the final switch. The ship shuddered violently as the clamps released without clearance. Red warning lights flashed across the cockpit. But Ethan ignored them. The Nomad lurched forward. Leaving the docking bay in a burst of speed, the station's alarm sirens wailed behind them. And a voice on the comm barked, "Unauthorized departure. Freighter Nomad, stand down immediately." Ethan killed the comm again and pushed the throttle. Stars stretched into long streaks as they sped away from the station. The inertial dampeners strained, pressing them all back into their seats. For a moment, there was silence. Only the steady hum of the engines remained. Lyra looked at Ethan like he had just pulled them out of a burning building. But Ethan didn't relax. His scanner showed a small blip following them. "We've got company," he muttered. Through the rear viewport, a small black ship appeared. Sleek and fast. It was closing the distance. Sierra's voice was tight. "That's them." "They won't stop." Ethan activated the ship's defensive shields. But the Nomad wasn't built for combat. It was a trader ship, meant for speed and cargo. Not fighting. The first blast from the pursuing ship hit the shields, sending a shiver through the hull. Lyra cried out, gripping her seat. Ethan kept his voice steady. "We're not letting them take you. Not now. Not ever." He plotted a jump to a nearby unregulated system, a place where they could hide long enough to make repairs and figure out what to do next. Another blast shook the ship. The shield indicator dipped into the red. "Hold on," Ethan shouted, pulling the lever. The stars outside blurred, then snapped back into focus. The chasing ship was gone, at least for now. The sudden stillness after the chaos felt strange. Ethan slowed the ship to a steady drift and checked the navigation now. Signals, no ships nearby, just empty space. Lyra's breathing was fast, but she was smiling now. "We made it," she whispered. Ethan turned to Sierra. "You need food, water, and rest. I have supplies." But Sierra shook her head slightly. "You've already done too much, human." Ethan leaned back in his seat. "You can call me Ethan," he said. "And I didn't save you because I expect anything in return. I did it because no one should have to beg for help." Sierra's eyes lowered, but there was a faint warmth there now. Lyra reached across and held Ethan's hand, small, fingers curling around his. Outside the viewport, the stars seemed calmer. But Ethan knew the danger hadn't passed. Whoever those collectors were, they had money, ships, and patience. They would be back, for now, though they were safe, and in that quiet space between the stars, Ethan realized something. He wasn't just taking them away from danger. He was bringing them towards something new, something that felt a lot like family. The Nomad drifted quietly in the black sea of space, far from any busy lanes or patrolling ships. It felt like they were alone in the universe. Only the faint hum of the ship's systems and the occasional click of cooling metal filled the silence. Ethan had set the ship on low-power mode to avoid detection. They couldn't run forever. So hiding for now was the best choice. He stepped out of the cockpit and into the living area. Carrying a tray with 3 steaming cups of nutrient broth, Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor, watching the small emergency heater with wide eyes. Sierra was leaning against the wall, her arms loosely wrapped around herself. She looked up when Ethan entered, her gaze cautious but no longer as sharp as before. "Here," Ethan said, placing the cups on the small table bolted to the floor. "It's not much, but it's hot." Lyra moved first, taking one cup with both hands. She sipped carefully, her face lighting up at the warmth. Sarah hesitated, her eyes flicking between Ethan and the cup. Finally, she reached for it, her hands trembling slightly. Ethan noticed the way her fingers shook, and how her breathing sounded strained. He didn't comment. Instead, he sat down on the opposite side of the table, leaning back against the wall. For a while, they ate in silence. The tension between them was still there, but it was softer now, like a rope that had loosened but not yet been cut. After a few minutes, Lyra spoke. "Where are we going?" Ethan shrugged. "Somewhere safe, somewhere they can't find you for a while." Sarah's voice was quiet but steady. "There's no such place, not for us." Ethan met her gaze. "There's always somewhere." She looked away, sipping her drink. He could tell she didn't believe him, but she also didn't argue. That was progress. When the food was gone, Lyra curled up in a blanket and drifted to sleep beside the heater. Ethan started to get up to check the ship's systems, but Sarah's voice stopped him. "You're wounded," she said softly. Her eyes were on his arm, where a small tear in his shirt revealed a red burn mark, probably from the last exchange of fire before the jump. Ethan glanced at it. "It's nothing." Sarah frowned. "You should let me see it." Ethan hesitated. She had barely spoken to him before, and now she was offering to help. He sat back down, holding out his arm. She knelt beside him, her movements slow and careful. Her hands were cold but gentle as she pulled the sleeve back. Her eyes scanned the wound with a focus that surprised him. "It's not deep, but it could get infected," she murmured. Ethan watched her work. "You know how to treat injuries?" Sarah gave a small nod. "I used to, before." She didn't finish the sentence, but he understood. Before the chains, before the market. Before everything was taken from her, she cleaned the wound with a cloth. Her hands steady, even though her breathing was still uneven. Ethan noticed the thin scars on her wrists, the ones left by years of shackles. He didn't ask about them, but he didn't look away either when she was done. She tied a strip of clean fabric around his arm. "There," she said quietly. "Thank you, Ethan." Replied Sarah didn't answer right away. Her eyes lingered on the bandage. Then she looked up at him. "Why did you help us, human?" "You could have walked away." Ethan leaned back, his gaze drifting to the small heater where Lyra slept. "'Cause I know what it's like to need someone and have no one there." Sarah's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something. But instead, she lowered her gaze. The ship rocked slightly, pulling both of their attention. Ethan moved quickly to the cockpit, checking the sensors. A faint signal was pinging on the edge of detection. He frowned, was weak, but it was there. "They're still looking," he muttered. Sarah stepped into the cockpit behind him. Then, "We can't stay here." Ethan nodded. "We'll move again soon, but I want to keep jumps unpredictable. Makes it harder to follow." Sarah crossed her arms, staring at the stars beyond the viewport. "They won't stop." Ethan glanced at her. "Neither will I." For a long moment, she didn't respond. Then she said, almost too softly to hear, "Lyra has been calling you Dad since the market." Ethan looked at her, unsure how to respond. "I noticed." "She's never done that before," Sarah continued. "Not with anyone. Not even when people tried to use her to control me." Ethan's voice was low. "I'm not trying to control her, or you." Sarah met his eyes, and for the first time, there wasn't only caution there. There was a flicker of trust, fragile, but real, back in the living space. Lyra stirred in her sleep, mumbling something Ethan couldn't hear. Sarah turned toward her, the moment between them breaking. She knelt beside her daughter, adjusting the blanket. Ethan leaned back in the pilot seat, watching the faint signal on the scanner fade into nothing. For now, they were alone again. But he knew it wouldn't last. The darkness of space surrounded them, silent and endless. But inside the small walls of the Nomad, something had begun to change. The chain of fear was still there. But slow, hesitant trust was starting to form in its place. And Ethan had no intention of letting anyone break it. The Nomad floated in the shadow of a lonely asteroid field. Ethan had powered down most systems to keep them hidden. The stars were distant pinpricks of light. And the silence felt heavy. Lyra was still asleep in her bunk. Curled under a thin blanket, Sarah sat at the small table. Tracing the edge of her cup with a finger, Ethan was in the cockpit, scanning nearby space for movement. His eyes were tired, but his focus never wavered. He spotted a small outpost on the edge of the scanner range. It was the kind of place smugglers and drifters used to trade fuel and supplies without questions. They needed both, and he knew they couldn't keep hiding forever. Ethan returned to the table. "We're going to dock at a small station for supplies," he said. "We'll be in and out quickly." Sarah's gaze sharpened. "Those places, they're dangerous." Ethan gave a small smile. So was starving. She didn't argue. But the worry in her eyes stayed. When they arrived, the station looked half-dead, lights flickering. Docking bays half empty. The Nomad slid into a bay. With a groan of metal, Ethan kept his sidearm at his belt and told Sarah and Lyra to stay aboard. But Lyra shook her head. "I want to come." Ethan hesitated. Then glanced at Sarah. She frowned, but gave a small nod. "She'll be safer with you." Then alone, so the three of them stepped into the dim docking bay. The air smelled faintly of oil and smoke. Merchants watched them from behind crates, whispering in low voices. Ethan led them toward a small supply shop, keeping his eyes on every shadow. Lyra walked between him and Sarah, holding both their hands. Inside the shop, a tired alien clerk gathered fuel canisters and water packs while Ethan checked the prices. It was expensive, but they didn't have a choice. That's when Ethan noticed him across the street. Leaning against a support beam was a tall alien with deep scars along his jaw. His eyes locked on Sarah like he had found a long-lost prize. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. Sarah froze, her skin paling. Ethan saw her hands tighten around Lyra. "Who is he?" Ethan asked under his breath. Her voice was tight, almost shaking. "His name is Vecker. He worked for the collector who owned me." Ethan's grip on his sidearm tightened. Vecker pushed off the beam and started walking toward them. "Stay close," Ethan said to Sarah and Lyra. He paid the clerk quickly, grabbed the supplies, and turned for the docking bay. But Vecker was faster. He stepped into their path, his eyes flicking from Sarah to Lyra. Well, he said in a low, mocking tone. "Look what I've found. My master will be pleased." Lyra shrank behind Ethan. Sarah stood still, but her eyes burned. "You're not taking them," Ethan said evenly. Vecker smirked. "And you're going to stop me? You don't even know who you're dealing with, human?" He made a subtle hand signal, and two more aliens stepped out from the shadows behind him. Both armed, Ethan's mind raced. Fighting here would draw too much attention. But running would be difficult with Lyra and Sarah so close. Vecker took a step closer. "I could make you rich, human. Give them to me and walk away." Ethan's reply was instant. "Not happening." The moment the words left his mouth, one of Vecker's men reached for a weapon. Ethan moved first, grabbing Lyra and shoving her toward Sarah. "Run," he barked. The docking bay erupted into chaos. Shouts echoed off the metal walls. Ethan fired a warning shot that hit a crate, sending splinters flying. It was enough to make the crowd scatter. Sarah pulled Lyra toward the ship, while Ethan kept the attackers at a distance. He ducked behind a support pillar, exchanging fire with the two armed men. Vecker stayed back, smiling like a predator, enjoying the hunt. Ethan knew they couldn't win a drawn-out fight here. He darted toward the Nomad, blasting a fuel drum along the way. The explosion shook the bay. Buying them a few seconds, Sarah had already opened the hatch. Shoving Lyra inside, Ethan followed, slamming the controls to seal the door. "Strap in," he shouted, running for the cockpit. The engines roared to life. Vecker's men fired at the ship, sparks flying as shots hit the hull. Ethan ignored the alarms and yanked the ship out of the docking clamps. The Nomad shot into open space, the station shrinking behind them, but on the scanner, a small fast ship was already in pursuit. "It's him," Sierra said from behind, her voice cold. "Vecker won't stop until we're back in chains." Ethan's hands tightened on the controls. "Then we make sure he never gets the chance." He pushed the engines to maximum, weaving through the asteroid field ahead. The rocks tumbled slowly, but each one could tear the Nomad apart if they hit. The pursuing ship followed, weaving skillfully. "Hold on," Ethan shouted, twisting the ship between two massive spinning stones. The Nomad scraped past by mere meters, but Vecker's ship was still there. Ethan saw a narrow tunnel in the rock ahead, barely wide enough for their ship. It was a risk, but so was everything now. Without warning, he dove into the tunnel. The walls rushed past in a blur, alarms blaring as the ship's sensors screamed warnings behind them. Vecker's ship tried to follow, but a larger chunk of rock broke off from above. Slamming into his hull, the scanner showed the pursuit fading. Ethan didn't slow down until they burst out of the other side of the asteroid, the open stars greeting them once more. Lyra was shaking but smiling. "We lost him," she whispered. Ethan glanced at Sierra. She was still gripping the back of his seat, her knuckles white. But her eyes held something different now, something closer to belief, for now. Vecker was gone, but Ethan knew this was only the first time they'd cross paths. And next time, it would be even more dangerous. The Nomad floated quietly in deep space. The asteroid field was far behind them now, but the tension inside the ship was still heavy. Sierra sat at the table with Lyra leaning against her, the little girl finally asleep. Ethan stood in the cockpit doorway, watching them silently. He had questions too many, but he waited until Lyra's breathing softened into steady rhythm before speaking. "You need to tell me everything, Sierra." She didn't look up at first. Her fingers absently brushed Lyra's hair. "If I tell you, you'll understand why running is not enough." Ethan moved closer, sitting across from her. "Then tell me." Sierra's eyes lifted to his, and for a moment, there was no caution there, only exhaustion. "I was born into a noble family on Horus Prime. My father owed debts to the collectors. He couldn't pay, so he sold me into service to them. I was 15. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't interrupt. "They called it service," she continued bitterly. "But it was slavery. I was passed between powerful men as property, traded for favors and money when I tried to escape. They caught me, they chained me, and that's when they put me under Vecker's watch." Her gaze hardened. "Vecker was the one who broke me the most. He was my jailer, my guard, and my hunter when I ran." She looked down at Lyra, brushing her cheek gently. "I met Lyra's father in those years. He was another prisoner. He died trying to help me escape. I've been running with her ever since." Ethan leaned forward. "And if they catch you again?" "They'll kill me," she said simply, "and they'll sell Lyra." Silence hung between them. The hum of the Nomad systems was the only sound. Ethan's mind raced. The truth was worse than he expected. Running from bounty hunters was one thing, but going against a network like the Collectors, that was another level of danger entirely. "You're thinking about leaving us?" Sarah said quietly. Not accusing, just stating a possibility. Ethan shook his head. "No." He took a deep breath. "I'm thinking about how to end this so you don't have to keep running." Sierra's brows knit together. "You can't fight them, human. You don't know how deep their influence runs. They have eyes and hands in every system." Ethan met her gaze. "Then we don't fight them in every system. We hit them where it hurts, once. So they can't come after you again?" She almost laughed, but it was humorless. You talk like... It's possible. It is, he said firmly. If we do it right. Sierra studied him for a long moment. Her voice softened. Why? Why risk your life for us? Ethan's answer came without hesitation. Because I made a choice back in that market. And I'm not the kind of man who goes back on a choice. For a moment, Sierra said nothing. Her eyes searched his face as if trying to find a lie. But there was none. From the bunk, Lyra stirred, half awake. Dad, are we safe now? She mumbled. Ethan's voice was steady. We will be. That night, as Lyra slept again, Ethan sat alone in the cockpit, looking at the stars. He thought about all the ways this could end badly, but none of them made him want to turn away. He pulled up the nav charts, scanning for a name. Sierra had mentioned Vecker's master. The one who truly owned her debt, if they could take him down. The collectors might leave her alone, or at least think twice before sending more hunters. The database gave him the location Raven's Gate, a fortified space station in a neutral sector, the kind of place where the law didn't reach. But deals shaped entire star systems. Sierra appeared in the doorway. Her arms were crossed. You found him? Ethan nodded. Raven's Gate, her expression darkened. That place is a death trap. No one walks in unless they belong, and no one walks out unless they're allowed. Ethan smirked faintly. Guess we'll just have to make sure we're allowed to walk out. She shook her head slowly. If we go there, we might not come back. He stood and stepped closer. If we don't go there, Vecker will find you. Again. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in a year, but he will, and I'm not going to keep running until we drop dead in some back alley. Sierra's eyes met his, and something shifted. Fear was still there. But there was also resolve. She took a breath. Then we do this together. Ethan nodded once. Together, they stood there for a moment, the quiet hum of the ship around. Then Sierra glanced toward the sleeping quarters. She can't know how dangerous it is. She needs to believe we're just going somewhere new. Ethan agreed. She'll believe it, for now. He returned to the cockpit and plotted a course. It would take them through empty sectors. Avoiding the main trade lanes, every jump would bring them closer to Raven's Gate and closer to the most dangerous gamble of their lives, in the shadows of the living space. Sierra watched him work. She still didn't understand why this human was willing to risk everything. But for the first time in years, she felt like maybe they had a chance. Raven's Gate loomed in the darkness like a black crown. Its jagged towers reached out into space, lit by the cold blue glow of docking lights. The station was huge, a city in the void, filled with criminals, mercenaries, and those who dealt. In shadows, Ethan guided the Nomad toward the docking bay, his hands steady on the controls. Sierra stood behind him. Her arms crossed tightly. Lyra was in her bunk, thinking they were only here to buy new clothes and supplies for a fresh start. This is it, Ethan said quietly. Sierra's voice was tight. Once we step inside, there's no turning back. Ethan glanced at her. We're not turning back. The Nomad landed with a heavy thud on the steel floor of docking bay 12. The airlock hissed open, and the smell of oil, smoke, and too many bodies in one place filled the ship. Ethan stepped out first, scanning the crowd. 2 guards approached. Their armor mismatched, but their rifles steady, weapons stay holstered. Human, one growled. Business? Ethan kept his voice even. I'm here to see your master. The guards exchanged a glance, then laughed. You and every desperate fool who comes through here. Sierra stepped forward, her voice cold. Tell him Sierra of Aura's Prime has returned. The laughter stopped. The guards stiffened. One of them touched his cum, speaking quickly in a language Ethan didn't understand. Moments later, they motioned for them to follow. They were led through winding corridors, past rooms where deals were made and fights broke out. The walls were covered with screens showing news, bounties, and surveillance feeds. every step brought them deeper into the heart of the station. Finally, they entered a massive chamber. At the far end sat a tall alien in dark robes, his face hidden beneath a smooth metal mask. Around him stood guards in heavy armor, and to one side, leaning casually against a pillar, was Vecker. His grin widened when he saw them. "I told you, she'd come back eventually." Syrah's hand tightened into a fist. Ethan stayed calm, stepping forward. "I'm here to make an offer." The masked master's voice was deep and smooth. "And what could you possibly offer me, human?" "Freedom," Ethan said simply. "You let Syrah and her daughter go, and I erase something you've been hiding from the entire sector." There was a ripple of tension in the room. The master's head tilted slightly. "You're bluffing, Ethan." Smiled faintly. "Your network's been leaking shipments for months. I have the logs, the routes, the names of the captains who betrayed you. And when word gets out that you can't control your own people..." He let the sentence hang in the air. The master was silent for a long moment. Then he waved a hand, and the guards lowered their weapons slightly. "Interesting," Vecker snarled. "You can't just let them walk out?" The master ignored him. "What guarantee do I have that you won't use this information against me later?" "You don't," Ethan said. "But you have my word for a criminal king." Trust was worth nothing but the risk of losing face in front of his entire empire was worse. The master leaned back. "Very well, human, you and your family may leave." Vecker stepped forward. "You're making a mistake." The master's hand shot up, silencing him. "Enough, Vecker. You failed me more than once." His tone was final. And Vecker's eyes burned with hatred as he glared at Ethan and Syrah. The guards opened the way. Syrah's steps were quick, her shoulders tense until they were back in the docking bay. Lyra was waiting at the edge of the ship, her small face lighting up when she saw them. "Did we get the clothes?" she asked innocently. Ethan knelt, smiling. "Better than that, we got a whole new life." They boarded the Nomad, and within minutes, the ship lifted off. The cold shape of Raven's Gate shrinking in the distance. Inside, the air felt lighter. Syrah stood in the middle of the living space, looking at Ethan. "You risked everything for us." "I made a promise," Ethan said simply. Lyra ran to him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "You're really my dad now, right?" Ethan looked at Syrah, and for the first time, she smiled, not the guarded smile she used before, but a real one. "Yes," she said softly, "he is." Ethan's voice was steady. "And you're really my family." Outside, the stars stretched on forever, but for the first time, none of them felt lost in the dark. They had each other, and that was more than enough. The Nomad sailed on, leaving the past behind. A human, an alien woman, and her daughter bound not by blood, but by choice, and in that quiet, endless night, a family was born.